Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Common Futures Conversations webinar, which will be discussing how can we increase youth representation in government. It's great to see so many of our CFC community joining the discussion today. It's good to see you here. And a very warm welcome to our speakers, Brando Benifei, Member of European Parliament, and Samson Itodo of Yaga Africa. Also welcome to those who will be joining us via Facebook Live. Whether you're part of the CFC community or a new member, you're very welcome, and thank you for joining us. This webinar will be concluding a month-long dialogue that took place in the Common Futures Conversations online platform. This is the second round of dialogue that we have been holding on the platform with a community of young people from Africa and Europe. The community has been discussing ideas for increasing youth representation in politics, as well as voting for some of the most popular solutions proposed in the platform. The subject of youth representation in politics is really central to what we're trying to do with our CFC community. It is, in fact, the reason we have built this project and this online platform. And this was done in collaboration with 27 country representatives, young people that we've been working with from 13 African and European countries. But it's really great to see how the community has grown to attract so many hundred of people at present. Thank you again to our two speakers for agreeing to spend the next hour with us to share your thoughts and listen to some of the excellent ideas that have been generated through the most recent dialogue on youth participation in politics. I will invite you to present very shortly. It would be great to have you present for about 10 minutes each. And after that, we'll be inviting two members of our community to present their ideas. There are two ideas at least that will be presented at this webinar. The first one was developed collaboratively by Sanne Thiessen, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, from the Netherlands, Mondher Tounsi from Tunisia, Michelle Alimasi from Italy, and Gift Jedida from Kenya. And the second one is by El Batul Mazigi from Algeria. And for our participants who do not know our speakers, Brando Benifei is a member of the European Parliament, head of delegation of the Italian Socialist and Democrats MEPs, and vice president of the European Movement International. Brando is active on youth policies, digitalization, and rights of persons with disabilities. And Samson Itodo is the executive director of Yaga Africa, a community of change makers focused on building sustainable democracies in Africa. And Samson is also the convener of the Not Too Young to Run movement, which led to the successful advocacy for the reduction of age limit for running for public office in the Nigerian constitution. Thank you once again. And Samson, do you want to start us with your 10 minutes, please?
Thanks, Tigi, and thanks to everyone and members of the community. Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, wherever you are in the world. And it's a delight to be here to share some thoughts on how we can increase youth representation in government. For those who know me, I am leaving and I want to retire old and expired politicians from public office because they have been the huge source of our underdevelopment and the challenges that we face. We can't talk about youth representation in government without first answering the question, why do we even need young people in government? And what I have seen over the years is this dilemma on whether demanding youth representation in government is to fulfill a democratic ideal or is to reclaim the state. Now, our societies are fractured and are bedeviled by several leadership and governance challenges. And it's very, very important that we emphasize that when we talk about youth representation in government, it's about reclaiming the state. It's using political power to lift people out of poverty. And if our own concept of increasing youth representation isn't about providing excellent public leadership, then it makes no sense. Because democracy should deliver development to the people. And that is why across the world, democracy is under scrutiny because it has failed or is failing to deliver development to the people. The second point is about the youth identity. Every human being has got identity. Our own world and society is characterized with structural identities, and these identities can be religious, can be ethnic, there are several even sexual identity. But these structural identities are permanent identities, but the youth identity is not a permanent identity. So as we talk about youth representation, we must keep at the back of our minds that the youth is a transient age. So today's youth will be tomorrow elders. So it is very, very important that we emphasize this. And there are diverse ways of increasing youth representation in government. And there are two ways. One, it can be via appointments. And second, it can be via elections. And over the years, across different societies, be it Africa and other parts of the world, young people have been excluded from elective offices. In most cases, for appointive offices, they are confined to positions that makes them publicists, and they only provide PR services for the older people. So they are either special assistant on social media or special assistant on digital media. But there are just a few young people who hold substantive positions, like either commissioners or ministers of finance or ministers of infrastructural development. And this is what we need to change. We need to get our leaders to understand the value that young people bring to the table. And I always say this to fellow young people: do not engage for political space from a standpoint of age, but negotiate for political space based on the value that you bring to the table. The age can open up the conversation, but it will not keep you on that decision-making table for long. That is why investing in personal and self-development to provide solutions is very, very critical. And here is my proposal, just 3 proposals on how we can increase youth representation in government. Young people need to get interested in politics. We need to get interested in political parties. There are political parties that align with your identity or your ideology. Can we get into those political parties? We always claim that political parties is a bunch of old men, because politics, even in Africa, like someone would say, is an old boys club. And that needs to be disrupted. So we need to get young women into political parties and begin to organize within the political parties. The unity of purpose is very, very critical. And so get into political parties and run for office. The cost of politics may be very, very high, but there are innovative ways of financing your political campaigns. There are crowdfunding. You can also, volunteer and build social capital. Oftentimes I hear people who want to run for office forget that all politics is local. Go to your local community, make yourself popular, make yourself known. So when you want to run for office, you have lots of people who will support you when you want to run for office. The second point is about leadership development. Mentorship is very, very critical for a lot of young people. And within political parties and out of political parties, we need an intentional effort that invests in building the leadership capital of young people. And I enjoin young people to subscribe to mentorship programs that helps build their leadership competencies and also strengthens their networks, because politics is about numbers. You need the numbers, and these numbers you can get within your generation, but you also need the support of the older generation as well. So mentorship is very critical, and building those strong networks. The third point is about appointive offices. And I want to emphasize once again that if young people want to get into politics, and get represented in government, they must show capacity. Our world needs solution providers. Leadership is about responsibility and solution. So if your age be an added advantage for you, but be well capacitated enough to provide alternatives. And that is what our world actually needs. Appointive positions is very, very critical. What I've seen worked over the years is young people putting themselves together either as movements or as organizations to support legislators in the parliaments or even ministries by sharing policy briefs and providing solutions. One way to swing or win this debate lies in our ability to provide solutions. And I tell you, the doors will be open if we provide solutions to those problems that bedevil our society, be it poverty, be it infrastructural deficit, be it insecurity. Can we be the solution, that generation that provides the solutions? So when we are given that space in either public office, be it elective or appointive, we will show capacity that lifts people out of poverty, but also fixes that fractured relationship between state and society. I think I'll stop here for now.
Thank you, Samson. That was really, really interesting and engaging. I took quite a lot from there, but my most important takeaways being solution-oriented, as well as actually making active, joining political parties and making active effort in order to do so. But there was a question that was raised previously. The difficulty of young people today to identify with many political parties. How would you answer to that?
No, because politics, let me use Africa where I proudly come from. Politics is an old boys club. And not just old boys club, it's made of old men, some of them very old, and are expired. They don't have the stamina. They don't have the innovation that young people have. And so they protect themselves. They always want to perpetuate themselves in office. So when you see elections come, young people are nothing but just demography, and they don't have any political power or that space. And that's what we need to reverse. And that is why, what you've seen in Africa is young people are now establishing movements. So if you look all through the last 4 to 5 years, movements are now changing the narrative. So build strong movements that challenges the political formations that we have. Secondly, can we get more young people into political parties and begin to disrupt those political parties? When I mean disruption, I mean positive disruption. Look at South Africa, for example. Look at what happened to Julius Malema when he left the ANC and started the EFF. It took them about one election cycle, but look at where the EFF is today. And if they had not come out of the EFF and established, out of the ANC and established their own party, they couldn't have posed the challenge that he posed to the ANC today. And a lot of reforms and positive disruption in South Africa has been driven by the EFF. So one way to do that, it has to be a bifurcated approach. We should get young men and women, because oftentimes when we talk about young people, we focus on men. Let's get young men and young women who have competence, who have character, who have capacity into political parties, and let them start providing solutions. Help the parties organize, help the parties mobilize resources. Make yourself an asset that cannot be ignored.
Great, thank you very much. And we're very lucky to actually have today Brando with us, because he's a young politician. Brando, over to you.
Thank you. Well, I think we heard already many interesting contributions on the point from Samson Itodo, and I want to thank you for involving me in this discussion. I think that it's very important that we focus on one point, that young people have often an indication from the political parties of being at the center of their interest, of being, I mean, we always hear politicians saying that young people are the future, that we must build our policies and our politics considering this fact, and that we have to care about young people. But to be honest, it is true that in most countries, young people don't turn out to vote enough. And this makes them much weaker in the real power struggle of electoral politics. Because when they choose to abstain, to not participate, because I've seen it a lot, even in recent times when I was participating in discussing with young people organizing the Fridays for Future, for example. We had a lot of young people saying we are not sure if voting will actually influence what we are fighting for, and this conviction is based on a lack of support by traditional politics in what young people thought that were their priorities. But this is a vicious circle that must be broken, because if young people don't care about electoral politics, they turn out only in a limited number compared to all their voters. The political parties will care and will deal with the priorities of young people less and less, and this reduces also their interest in participating. We have seen this happening a lot, and this has led to, I think, a widening of the divide between older and younger generations in terms of not just political engagement, but also the distribution of power and of opportunities. This is something that we have seen to some extent worldwide, even in countries where there are much more young people than in many European countries. The experience I have, obviously, being Italian, is a country that has a majority of older people. But this is a larger phenomenon that now brings us with the need for young people to, yes, build networks, work for projects. We have been doing a lot from the European institutions to try to build more opportunities for informal education of young people, their civic engagement. I want to, and one of the ideas I think that we will discuss is about also including young people in institutions and in structures in a way that is similar to some things that we are already doing as with some of the projects of the European Union. But I think it's very important that young people actually use these opportunities to build more political conscience. It's very important that they just don't, on one hand, they don't give they don't leave their representation only to an older generation, but also that we don't rely only on electing younger representatives. Because if the system is based on other interests, you can have younger politicians, but young people's perspective will not be fully included. It's important to have younger representatives because on some topics they can bring some specific perspective that an older generation cannot bring in. But in my opinion, the broader point is to have more engagement of young people at all levels, being electorally participating, being active with youth projects. which I think are very crucial. I want to conclude on this point. There is a lot of debate on the need for, in Europe, we have a lot of debate on the need for engaging young people politically by the teaching of kind of political education in school, institutional understanding. Yes, it's important. I work as a member of parliament, of the European Parliament. I can tell you that many young people don't know very well and don't know enough what we do. So formal education on this is important, yes. But I'm convinced it's even more important that we support and we boost the informal education on these topics. And it's very important that we support the capability of building meaningful participation and projects can bring young people together and build their own participation. In this way, I think we will build a more conscious citizenship. And this is something that is valid, I think, for all over the place. And it must be at the core of our efforts as politicians, especially as younger ones.
Thank you very much for that, Brando. There was something that you both keep on going back to, that need for support, education, mentoring, to bring the next generation to really be able to get into politics. And this is again one of the key points that our community were raising in the past. What is the path for becoming a politician? Because if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer, there is a very well-known path and an education system to go through. But how does one learn to become a politician has been a key question that I have had over time. It would be great now to actually hear a little bit more from our community representatives. I have the first one that was given to me. Is the idea title is making the shift from informal movements to formal representation. Who do we have presenting this one? We have 4 people that have proposed this idea. Can I, Sanne, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Yes, so our idea is indeed about, shifting informal movements into formal structures. The thinking behind it is that a lot of youth-led movements are really still very much informal and therefore don't get the recognition within the formal structures that we currently have. So after discussing with my teammates during the brainstorming session, we felt that we needed to work at this intersection in order to reflect also the diversities of young people that exist. So our idea essentially is finding a way to have young people within the formal structures, within governments, within, institutions, but then having these different young experts be backed by a broader network of youth-led movements that work on different issues, that have different members or participants. And then this can be a way for these young people within these institutions to, have some kind of a feedback loop to really know what is going on within the communities, what is going on within the different youth-led movements. And on the longer term, this can really help build more stronger relationships between young people and the institutions. Aside from these networks of, formal and informal young people or youth-led organizations that back these youth experts, we were also considering to have some kind of a youth board or a youth expertise group that could also be a direct and very short-term sounding board for these young leaders. If, for instance, they need to draft a policy recommendation or they are attending a high-level meeting or something else that needs some direct feedback, that would offer them with the opportunity to, consult a very exclusive, smaller group of youth that do have that link and can really help them also in the shorter term. So this was, in a nutshell, what our idea was.
Thank you very much for that, Sana. Over to you both for some feedback, some of your thoughts on this. We can perhaps start with you, Brando.
Well, yeah, I think it's very important that we work to give. If I can also pick up on some things, I've been on the same line. I've seen also coming on the chat. We need to give people, young people, the possibility to have the space to build to develop their projects, to build their ideas, and obviously, as you were saying earlier, to become a politically active person. I think it's something that cannot be considered as a kind of work, as a career. Today, I am a full-time representative because I'm a member of European Parliament. I've been politically active for a long time, being an activist for the causes I believed in, and I didn't think I would end up with this position that I have today. But it's obviously very now something that is taking my time. It's a full-time activity, and that's how it is today. But I think that it's important, as I tried to say earlier, that we don't just rely on having more young people elected and more youth leaders at the various levels of organized civil society. I don't think that's sufficient. I think if we want young people perspectives to be included in society, we need a larger kind of mobilization from young people that must be also based on ideas like the one that I've seen were discussed by your people participating in the project, like being included in the public administration, in the structures in a way that involves young people in the institutional processes in a more horizontal way. I don't believe in the idea that a few more MPs, young MPs being elected changes that will change, that can change the things. No, I mean to also be even more specific on what Agnes Kigotto is asking in the chat. I understood that the point being raised is that if young people take political spaces and end up like their predecessors. That's what I'm trying to say. I think that without a broader political participation by young people, even very good young politicians, they can be trapped in a system that maybe they don't become corrupt, but they have difficulty in really changing it if they are not supported by a change also on the ability of young people to participate, to be part of this societal mobilization of a change that is. I don't believe in the power of a single person, except exceptional situations, and you need a movement anyway. That's what I want to try to convey.
Thank you, and thank you also for covering Agnes's question. Samson, do you want to add something at this stage? First, sorry, if I can encourage also our participants, you're very welcome to engage with questions. You can use the Q&A box to send your questions, and we'll try to get to them to try to get to as many as possible throughout the meeting. All right, over to you, Samson.
Thank you very much. And to the team that put this together, fantastic idea. I just love the rationale, and so thumbs up to you guys. Just to piggyback on what Brando said. One is we all cannot be politicians, and we all cannot be elected into public office. In any case, the public office, the elective public office, are very, very limited. So only a few persons can actually occupy those offices. So we need other forms of engagement, and I think this idea fits into that. The second point is, and I want us to leave this meeting with this at the back of our minds, that public leaders are in their need of solutions. The fact that we've got people in public office does not mean they have all the answers to all the questions. So if informal movements are going to translate the providing solutions and get to us formal representation, I think this is a very, very fantastic idea. And there's a bit of that happening that I have seen in parts of Nigeria, in parts of Ghana, even in Kenya as well. But I just want to make one point, and this is just a feedback. Now, getting parliamentarians and policymakers on board will be the biggest success factors, and that's what your document says. I don't know to what extent that is the biggest success. Maybe we should raise the bar. As we talk about representation for what? We should always ask ourselves that question. Representation for what? Is it just to fulfill a democratic ideal that, hey, we've got young people represented, or it's about providing solutions to the problems that bedevil our society? I think it's important to underscore that and maybe broaden the scope of your success to not just the numbers or those who you get on board, but is what those numbers have done for you. Has it changed any policy? And even if a policy has been changed, how did it impact on the lives of young people or women or persons with disability? These are key questions that we need to ask. Representation for what? So we raise the bar. That way, the older people will listen to us when we are speaking. And they won't say, oh, these are just folks who are promoting ageism, because ageism is a big debate across Africa and other parts of the world. But I really love this idea, fantastic idea. And big ups to you guys.
Thank you, Samson. I would like to now invite El Batul to tell us a bit more about his idea. The Dialogue and Diplomacy Programs is the title.
Okay, thanks for inviting me in. So the idea actually focuses on the question that Sir Brando has already been mentioning on his speech, that we should ask ourselves why this youth is not really interested in discussing and talking about politics and not taking part in it. So since this youth does not care, or let's say is not interested in taking part of politics most often, it has been noticed that it's because youth lack some understanding to how politics work and how it should, and they have some lack in understanding their own rights and roles, which is why we see some chaos and some unorganized protests very often in some countries. Why this lack? Because there is no proper education, and even if there is a formal education that is about politics, it's not quite engaging for youth, and it's not very attractive, or let's say it's not interesting to our youth. So in order to make this political education more interesting for this youth, we are suggesting to make these dialogue and diplomacy programs. So what are these programs? There are the three key points. The first key point is getting these youth to practice skills needed in politics, such as debate, negotiation, conflict resolution, public speaking. These are all essential skills needed for any politician, and are attractive to our youth in order to engage into politics. So these soft skills will be the catch for our youth in order to engage in politics in the first place. The second phase, or the second key point in the whole program, should be in implementing these soft skills and putting them into practice. How to put them into practice, and that will be through dialogues, discussions, debates, and those debates should and discussions should be discussing and analyzing real issues that are very common or are relevant to the political states within the country or within the whole world. And while they are discussing and analyzing these issues, they can, at the end, come up with solutions because they are implementing those skills, those analyzing and debate skills and discussions into putting, discussing the problem and finding a solution at the end. The third key point would be in getting these, let's say, the government representatives or people for parliament or wherever representation from the government, they should be part of this discussion and dialogues in order to listen to the youth solutions and try to discuss them and analyze them together in order to find common solutions at the end. And this way, even if we don't have at the end many youth engaged within the discussion and the dialogue with the government or with the parliament or whatever institution, the first key points would be at least solving the problem in having people, in having youth especially, engaging in politics, reading and hearing about it, not just engaging with it through social media and newspapers and only, but rather read about it and analyze and even more. So this way we can build more aware citizens, and we can go even further in building good politicians who can listen, because they have learned that through discussions and debates, who can listen and open the discussion to other youth and everyone concerned within the situation. So in short, that's the idea. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Batuli. We can perhaps get some feedback on this from you first, Samson.
Okay, thanks. So I'm also excited about this. And the reason why this is very, very important, and it fits the point Brando made, that if we want to influence political behavior, it is important to invest in political education. I call it political education. Some people call it civic education. Some people call it voter education. But political education is very, very important. And using the instrumentality of dialogue and debates and frame discussion is a very, very veritable tool. So I, again, really excited about this because a lot of people are not aware. A lot of young people are not aware. But I think if we use, innovative ways of reaching out to young people and we make politics more interesting for them, they can engage. So I love this fusion of both media and music, and art. It's really critical. So stimulating debates. And, just growing up in high school, we were introduced to the culture of debates. So it's good, and I think it's a fantastic idea. Just a few sort of feedback. One is your proposal is this should be held by NGOs and academic institutions. I know context matters, and I know there are people from different parts of the world. Maybe we can also task our religious institutions, to also host some of these debates, because religious institutions in Africa, or traditional institutions in Africa, are very, very powerful. So our churches and our mosques and our societies, should encourage debates amongst people, amongst young people. It helps in honing those skills that we want to promote. And I would say that beyond NGOs and academic institutions, I know your idea is carved in a way that shouldn't be politicized, but I want to encourage that even political parties should be tasked with the responsibility of promoting these debates within political parties. Because political parties are are vehicles for influencing policy and also building leadership development. So you can ask a political party to develop this kind of program, and the parties should fund it as part of its own leadership development and also outreach to young people. So not just NGOs or academic institutions, we should expand the scope to even political parties and our religious institutions. But I really love this fantastic idea because it will help influence political behavior.
Please, why don't I give you the opportunity to address the point?
Well, I think it's important, as I said, to have also informal ways of learning this kind of political or civic education. And I think that using also apps, having some way of, we can say, of gamification of the developing an understanding and knowledge as a citizen, it's something that should be explored, because I think that we need to be connected to the way people do things today. It's not that everything is fixed. One thing I think is very important is that we use the instruments, also the new technologies, to develop the capability of debating. I think it's very important that we do debates so that we can have people learn how to present their point of view and defend it in front of other people. I think this is a skill that must be deepened through the use also of instruments like apps or like virtual debates. I mean, in this COVID crisis, we have seen a lot of extra usage of the virtual meeting instruments. I think we need to use them also to build occasions of debate, maybe over distances, that develop one crucial skill that I think sometimes is missing. That is the ability to articulate, argumentate, and defend the different points of view. This is the opposite of the kind of the risk of ending up into authoritarian bubbles that are very important, very dangerous in our society. So that you talk only with the people that think the same as you, and you end up in your own little bubble. And this is terrible for democracy, because there cannot be democracy without the real debate between different ideas. It cannot be only the political leaders. It must be also people and young people.
Thank you, Brando. I think there's a question that came through. It follows really nicely from what you've just said on the importance of engagement and political dialogue, as well as your previous point on the importance of having youth participate in administration. However, this is from Atina Salikidu. It says, I agree with Mr. Benifei's point on increasing youth participation in administration, since there are many young people who wish to influence policy, but do not necessarily want to engage with a particular political party. Do you think that work in the form of internships, for example, like the EU or UN are currently doing, could be the first step to have the youth influence policy? So dialogue outside of political parties. What is your take on that?
I think that's very important. That's in fact what I was trying to say, because I think that we need absolutely the development of a robust and organized civil society that is able to present its case in front of people, in front of the voters. I think this is especially important for young people, because an important way to fight the disillusionment, the distancing, is to avoid that the political debate is only left to the political parties to administer. I think it's very important that we support. In this way, I give you an example that is very well developed in many European countries. That is the idea of the youth councils at national level and also at local level. In this way, you have organizations that bring together youth movements and try to empower them. And especially in some countries, this is done well, in others less well, to give them the instruments to be able to be a counterweight to political parties. And this is very important, in my opinion, also in countries where there has been political changes recently. I've been working a lot with North Africa, countries with a lot of younger people there also demographically, and there the youth civil movements, they are more able to pursue and to present cases for change than the traditional parties, and they need to be supported in its capability to reach out to people. And yeah, I don't think that we can leave that to the political parties. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. We're getting very, very interesting questions coming through. Samson, if I can assign this one to you. This is from Michel Arimasi from Italy. One of the key questions is how to reach and engage young people that are not students. University students, but also high school students are more easily reachable and teachable, as with our proposals. But what about people that are outside educational structures? Because let's face it, they are the majority of the youth population, and at the same time, the most unheaded and the most complicated to reach. So what to do? What do we do about the huge number of young people that are outside of the educational setting?
I think fantastic question, because the truth is, majority of these young people that we talk about don't have access to whether formal or informal jobs or education. And so a deliberate strategy towards engaging them is very key. And this is where things like community-based organizations play a critical role at the community level, because you can find them at both urban and rural or semi-urban areas, depending on your classification. It's important for community-based organizations to design programs around self-development programs for these people. And it could be through camps, it could be through workshops, it could be through, radio. There are tools that can be used to reach out to these people, because they are very dispersed. So you need to locate those people. That's why it needs to begin from the community. Now, depending on the structure of your society, there are what people we call gatekeepers in a society. And these gatekeepers can either be traditional leaders, and I speak for Africa, given my background. These traditional leaders have control and access to these people. So they can identify these people, and you can establish clubs. You can establish clubs with these people to reach out to them, or we can build, establish youth development centers that provides opportunity for these people to converge. And tied to that is the role of local governments and local governance, because you can conduct civic education at the very local level on how they can engage with their local authority, either through petitions or through letters or through advocacy meetings or community development. That's one way to reach them. I am more interested in how do we reach the local community to bridge that divide between those in the urban areas and the rural areas. Because these categories of youth, and we know that the youth category is homogeneous in nature, and because it's not homogeneous, it's heterogeneous in nature, those who are the urban areas can be easily reached because you've got social media, they've got access to power, they have access to computers. But those who are in the rural areas do have access to their phones, no doubt, but it is easier to use offline sort of tools to reach them. So it is very, very possible. And there are programs that can be designed that targets these people, but identifying them and recruiting them into either clubs or associations for better outreach is very, very key.
Thank you. There is another question that I really want to take before we finish, but I feel that this is quite an important point. And Brando, perhaps it's sometimes great also to hear a bit of the European perspective. I usually, we hear a lot about accessibility of information being quite difficult, especially given the population, African countries being young democracies and so on. So, it's interesting that the question came from our one of our representatives in Italy. So I'll be grateful for some of your thoughts on this as well.
I know very well the point. Also in my work, I have to say, I've been. I give you an example on how I tried to bridge this issue. You know that the Erasmus program, that very important program for mobility of young people in Europe, is originally a program for university students, being expanded also to high school students in the last years with the Erasmus Plus mobility for students to go to other academic institutions, but it had a big problem of not being inclusive of the many young people that are working after high school studying. They are not in university. So what we did from the European Parliament was to change this. Now we created a new mobility program called the Erasmus Pro that will be active from next year to create opportunities to complete the training for new workers that are in traineeships or apprenticeships. We copied existing good programs between some of the member states. We turned it into a new pan-European program that will now allow for tens of thousands of young people that are young workers that started working to have a mobility opportunity, which is very important for what we discussed, because exactly through this kind of opportunities, we build a sense of European citizenship and also a sense of independence of young people that I think is very important part of the informal education that builds the being conscious citizens for today. And so obviously it's not something that is, I mean, covering all the subject, but I wanted to give you an example of the fact that we have taken into account very seriously the fact that we risk reaching only the students and not with many of the programs, many of these opportunities, and not people that are working since a young age. And this is a huge problem because it's also a problem of social mobility. So we worked to change, and we made it to change how the Erasmus program works. But I think that it's very important that when we build the participatory programs, we look at the inclusion and the participation of young workers. And this means also that we need to calibrate our discussion so that we tackle the problems of the life of young workers since maybe early age and not with university degree education. This means looking at the dynamics of stagnant wages, of the access to public services, to health services. This is something that is access to housing. This is something that resonates with young people that maybe are less daily involved daily with the issues of climate change. They feel it important, but not maybe as much as problems that are very close to their material daily needs. And sometimes we see these debates going far away from these focuses. And I think this is also important if we want to tackle this risk of disattachment.
Absolutely, you're absolutely correct on that, and fully agree. Just before we conclude, there is one last question, and it would be great if we could have short answers from both of you on this, or just address it a little bit. It's from Bruno Mourinho from Mozambique. Bruno is asking, how can we deal and what are the advices regarding the situation where young people are really active and have incredible ideas, but are living in a constant insecure environment and are afraid to give their face, to show their faces or dare to propose their names for public position or to politics in general? This is more on the worries of shrinking political spaces or where it has never existed in the first place. Maybe we start with you, Samson, and then for some comments from you as well, Brando, given the amount of collaboration as well on governance and between the EU and the African Union that has been ongoing for a long time. It would be great to hear your thoughts on how you navigate this within the EU and what are also the learning for other regions as well. Thank you, Samson.
Yeah, so one is in those contexts, you need to leverage, external organizations that have the capacity to influence either institutions within your states. There are people, and I say this as a student of power, any political party or any public leader listens to someone or listens to a group of people. You just need to identify who those people are. And there are ways to do that. So you can work with civil society. And that is why solidarity is very, very key when you live in those contexts. How do you build solidarity with other organizations and other individuals and with other institutions so that you can convey your message through those people and still protect your identity, depending on the context that you find yourself. The second is there are human rights organizations and human rights defenders who can also provide you cover and can also amplify your voice when the need arises. The third point, and I'd like to say this, that, and this may be very extreme, very, very extreme, is sometimes we need to mobilize numbers behind us and not stand alone. And that is where social movements play a critical role. Because when you have people behind you, they will protect you in most cases. So don't always stand alone. Have people. And the benefit of having a movement is government cannot arrest everybody. So there are specific individuals they may arrest, but it's good to have the numbers behind you so they protect you as a shield. But don't also forget that you can also use social media, to engage. And that's why governments are trying to limit access to the internet and shrink the civic space. But the greatest pushback is solidarity. And for me, is to continue to emphasize the need for us to stand in solidarity with each other. And if you have the numbers behind you, the people will stand up to defend you. We've seen that happen in different parts of Africa.
And thank you, Samson. Over to you, Brando, for final comments.
Yeah, well, I think we touched many topics in this discussion, but one crucial thing I think is, on the line of what also Samson was saying, is that even in the most difficult situations, if there is the capability of building a movement and building a larger consciousness, then you can build resilience against any political situation that can be also very detrimental in some cases for young people. And I want to spotlight, in fact, that today, with the global economic difficulty that will be happening with different situations in the different continents, but overall a moment of difficulty because of the COVID-19 crisis, there is a real risk that young people will pay the highest cost because of the fragility of their social protection. and this is in different aspects varied all over the world. And so it's very important that there is generational solidarity and understanding of the need to build a world that is able to look at the future and not only to survive the present. This is something that will interrogate we can say the responsibility of politicians. But we need young people to push them in the right direction. As I said at the beginning, we need young people to participate and to vote, because otherwise they will only be in their, obviously this is not the solution for everything, but this is an important thing I want to underline again, because when they participate, they cannot be ignored. Otherwise they risk to be ignored, and maybe in front of them they will have a lot of good words but not substance. And so that's why I think we need their engagement, and from the institutions, for those who believe this, we need to build really more opportunity and more possibility for young people to express and to go down this path. It's better for everyone. So that's what I want to say about this.
Thank you very much. That was really fascinating. Thank you to both of you for your presentations and for taking so many questions from such a different range of questions. And thank you also to our participants for your ideas, for engaging so actively in the platform and through this discussions, sharing your ideas, sharing your passion for so many important issues that it's, to be quite frank, very important that you remain engaged and that you continue to vote as well. I totally agree on that point, Brando. So we have come to the end of our webinar. Unfortunately, if we were physically in a room, we would have clapped our hand to thank you in the traditional way. But unfortunately, we are virtually connected. But thank you again. And we hope to continue engaging with you on the subjects in the coming months and years. Thank you.
Thank you.